Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product here at Alpha Software. And today's session, we are going to be taking a look at some questions that people have sent in over the week. So you can always send your questions into guides here, guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com for us to help you out with. I think a lot of people on this webinar today have taken advantage of that, but if you are new, it's a great resource for you. And so I've chosen a few areas that people were having issues with that I'd like to sort of show how we solve these challenges and hopefully to teach you a little bit more about how Alpha Anywhere works. Of course, I'm also here to answer your questions, so you could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel or the chat window of the GoToWebinar control panel, depending on how your interface is set up. So let's get started. Just a quick AV check, though, before I go any further. I'm going to start sharing my screen here in a second. And so can anyone let me know if you see cows in the background? Just type that into the background. And can you hear my voice? Or if you just tell me you have cows, I guess I know. Yes, there they are. Fantastic. Terrific. So let's take a look at the first issue. And that is, I'm just going to be doing a lot of work directly in Alpha Anywhere today. So I'm going to pop right into Alpha Anywhere. Here we are in the development environment. And, over the last few weeks, we've been going over the UX control, the UX component and the various controls that go in it. And today we're going to be revisiting that a bit. So the first question had to do with spacing controls on a UX. And in particular, this person was interested in checkbox controls, but the same logic will apply to everything else as well. And I'm going to show you what the issue was and how we correct it. So I'm going to go ahead and build a web component, a UX. And we're just going to start with a blank one. And then I'm going to add some controls. My favorite way of adding controls isn't to hunt for them there, but instead just to click the Add Controls green button here. And I'm going to look for a checkbox control. There it is. And now I have the option of creating a single new control or multiple controls. We're going to do multiple controls because we want to see how these lay out on the screen. So we'll say option 1 is our first control, and it's going to be of a type L for logical. How did I know L for logical? I'm going to go under type field codes. And because a checkbox can be yes or no, I'm going to save this probably in my database as a logical field. I could have saved it as something else as well. All right, so let me close that. And we'll type in option 2. Make that a logical one as well. And option 3. Now I've got those 3 options. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to go ahead and just save this UX. And I'm going to call it CB test. All right. So a developer wrote in and they said, listen, I've placed these 3 checkboxes on my UX control, but when I take a look at them in Working Preview, what I want to have happen is, first of all, I want to have the labels here on the left and the control over here on the right. And I don't want a ton of space in between these because I'm going to have a lot of checkbox options. So I'm going to want to really tighten up that space in my user interface. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to first adjust where the field label goes. So here we are in option 1. I'm going to come down here into label. In fact, I could do a search here for that, but I happen to know that it's down here. So I'm going to pop down here, field label, here we go. And it says, where's the position? Where's the field label go with relation to control? Right now it's set to above, but we're going to set that to left. Oops, we're going to set that to left if I can click on the right thing. Here we go. Save that again. And let's take a look in Working Preview and see if that's kind of what we're looking for. Ooh, we'll slow today. And yep, sure enough, option 1, and there is my checkbox. All right, that's getting closer. So let's apply that same setting to these other 2 kinds of controls. Now, a lot of people know about this cool trick, but I'm going to show it to you. If you're on a control and you want to copy a particular thing to multiple controls, all you have to do is select the property that you want to copy, and you move over here to this eyedropper or eyedrop paster, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to click on that, and it'll show me the other controls. And I'm going to choose option 2 and option 3. I'm going to say set properties, and now their position for the field label is set to left as well. Let's go into Working Preview, and we should see. Here we go. Option 1, option 2, option 3. So far, so good. The problem is that we don't want so much space in between those. So there was a couple places that you might think would be the obvious place to look. Like if I go into option 1, you're going to find a place called break. Here it is, break, and say break height. So you could set it to maybe something like 0 pixels. All right. That's not going to do it. And I'll show you in a second that the spacing is still exactly the same. You can increase break height above a certain amount, but you can't decrease. And unlike other CSS values, you can't even put a negative number in. It's just simply not going to work. And that's because Alpha has done a lot to wrap these controls in a way that will make them responsive on the screen when you change to different screen sizes and stuff. But you could go even further than that. And that is, what you could do is you could actually put these into what's called a freeform layout. And this is what I wanted to show you today because it gives you an awful lot of flexibility. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new control. And I'm going to say freeform layout. And there it is. And I can just click here to edit. I think I can double click to open it. I can. So my freeform edit region, I can start placing my fields in here instead, and I have more control over the HTML. But you'll notice I don't have any fields here to place. And the reason I don't have any fields is because it only shows fields that I have hidden. In other words, we don't want these controls to appear on our UX in 2 places. We just want it to appear in 1. So we make sure that you hide them first. So we're going to go back here to option 2, and I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to choose hide. And then, oh, someone just pointed out in the questions window that instead of using the eyedropper, all they do is right click. Well, let's give that a go. Right click, paste controls from clipboard. Oh, sorry, that's not what I want. That's what happens when you do things live. All right. Ah, I see. I right-clicked on the property itself, and I could just get to paste property value to other controls. So that's the same as clicking up here. Little shortcut. Thanks very much. So again, 2 and 3 are selected. I'm going to say set properties. And so all 3 of these controls should now be hidden. If I go into Working Preview, I should basically see nothing at this point if I've done it right. Yeah. Oh, option 1 and option 2 are still not hidden. So let's do a right-click on that property again. Or I'll just go up here. I'll say set them all to that, set property to that hide. So we'll say option 2. Oh, clearly I did something wrong, and I'm sure someone saw what I did. But anyway, I've hidden all 3 of these fields at this point. So if I go into Working Preview, it should be blank. And I think you'll see that it is. Terrific. So now that they're hidden, I can start using them in my freeform layout. So I'm going to double click on my freeform layout. I'm going to put in option 1. And then I'm going to put in a break. Remember, this is just HTML. Option 2. And option 3. Now I could set the spacing on each of these controls separately, but it's much easier just to put them all into a div container. So we're going to build a div. If I can type div style equals. And in this case, what we want to constrain is the line height. And I happen to know for this size control, line height of about 20 pixels seems to do the job. So let me close out my div tag. Okay. Now click OK. And I'm going to go back into Working Preview. And there are my checkboxes, but notice they're missing the labels. And that's because when I inserted those placeholders, the placeholders are only the fields themselves. So I'm going to need to put in those labels as well. Easy enough to do. I'm just going to go here and say option 1. And copy that. Make that option 2. And make that option 3. Okay. We're going to go ahead and save. We're going to go take a look at Working Preview again. And you see they're nice and tight. Option 1, option 2, option 3. You can now fit quite a few more on the page. And if you wanted to edit the spacing between, all you'd need to do is just adjust the line height. So we had it at 30. Let's put in a bunch of space again. We'll set it to 40. We'll go into Working Preview. And there we go, a bunch of space in between each of those. So the Freeform container is a very helpful way of allowing you to have very precise control over the fields that you use in your UX control. So it's something that I recommend that you use if you find that you don't have enough control otherwise, just using the standard properties for each one of those controls. All right, so that was the first one I wanted to cover. The next one I wanted to cover had to do with reporting. So we're going to go take a look at a report. No, I don't really need to save that. Okay. So I'm going to go over here into reports, and I'm going to create a new report. What I find kind of interesting here is, typically speaking, when you are on the web projects control panel and you want to build a new one of any of these things, say a component or a page or whatever, you can just click the new button and it gives you the options there. Oddly, I don't see one for reports. So for reports, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go down here to reports. You could right click and just say create new. This will build you out a new report. Now, reporting could easily be covered in 2 or 3 extended webinars, but I'm going to go through just some of the basics of them here for you because I want to get this wrapped up to move on to other subjects. So I'm going to go into create report. And we have a couple of options here. I can start with a blank freeform report or a blank layout table report. So you might be asking, okay, I don't know what the difference is between those, but I will tell you, the layout table report doesn't give you quite as much flexibility when it comes to the layout and look of your report. It does give you an awful lot. What it does give you, though, is a really high fidelity presentation of what you've created. And it's high fidelity across multiple platforms. So what I mean is, what you look at if you decide to display it as HTML will look very similar to what happens when it's exported, say, as an Excel file. And a layout table report can be exported as a Excel file, and that can actually be really helpful. You can also do PDF reports and some other things. So this is our newer style report, the layout table, and it's the one that I suggest that you really work with from now on if you can. So I'm going to choose a blank report layout, and I'm going to choose a data source, and my data source is going to be the Northwinds demo, of course. Now, if you don't know how to set up a data source or you want one to play around with, you could just click the Edit Named Data Connection Strings here. And then when you say this would be blank if you didn't have any, and you could say new, and then you could say, it gives you a default name, you could say connection 3, and then you can build it out from there. What happens though is if you come to this dialog box and you don't yet have this sample one that we include for you, there's a link here which lets you create it. And that's what I did earlier on, is I created that link and it made my connection string for me and it gave it a name. So here I just have to choose that name, sees that it connected correctly, and I'm going to go over here and create an ad hoc data source. And we're going to be doing it based on the customers table. And we're going to do company name, contact name, customer ID. We're going to need that because that's the key field. And if we want to update anything in here, we're going to need to include the key field. And let's do city and country. And actually, I'm not sure I need company name there, so that's fine. So now I'm going to go ahead and finish. And what this should give me is just a list of all my customers in that table. And it's asking me how many records do I want to retrieve. If I say 0, it means all records. Why would I set this to a different value? Well, if I'm going off a data source that has like hundreds of thousands of records or millions of records, you're going to have to wait for all of those to be downloaded down just to just to start editing the report, just to start creating the report. And that would be a huge waste of time. However, in this case, it's a pretty small database, so it's no big deal retrieving all the records. I'm going to set that to 0. And here I am at my blank report at this point. And so I'm going to actually just give this, just out of habit, I tend to give things names as soon as I can. I'm going to call this cust list 2. And I click save. And if I run this report, it's just going to be blank. There's really nothing in it. But what I can do is I can start taking a look. This is called a banded report writer. And in each one of these bands, I can place things. So the detail band is the band that repeats over and over again for each record. And so what I'm going to do is in the first cell here, I'm going to right click, choose edit cell contents. I'm going to choose my field. And it's going to be the first name. Okay. Whoops. Where did you go? Field. Select. Contact name is what I meant to say. Contact name. There we go. And the next one, let's do city and zip code for the next two. So that's, or city and country. So field, select, city, and field, edit cell content. Field, we're going to select the country. And so what I should see when I run this report is that for each one of the records here, I should see an entry. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this again. We're going to do a prompt preview. And there we go. Those are all of the customers that I have in the table. I don't know how many pages of them, 5 pages of them it looks like. And you'll see that they're from all different countries, different cities, and so on. What I want to do though, is I want to apply a filter now to this report. I only want to I want to make it set up so that I can start looking at a subset of the records that are in there. So one thing I can do, in fact, this is the way we suggest doing it, is to set up what's called an argument. And we'll set up the argument not here in the report editor, but I'm going to set it up so that it applies to the data source itself. There are 2 ways to do it. You could set it up so it applies to the data source, or you could put it right here in the filter. For example, in here, I could say filter. I'll just show you how to do it here as well. Country equals Germany. Okay. So I say okay to that, and I run my report again. You'll see I only get the Germany ones. Cool, easy. But what if I wanted to prompt someone or have this report get the value from maybe another dialog box that someone fills in where they've selected the country they wanted to see? I wouldn't put that here. I'd probably want to do that up at, I could, but I probably want to do that up at the database level so that I only get back from the server the database records that I want, as opposed to getting back all of the database records and having the Alpha server go ahead and sort them out. It's just more efficient to do it at the server level. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do here right now. So I'm going to save that. And we're going to go here to our customer list 2. And I noticed I've closed out of the report editor. This is key. You can't actually do anything unless you've closed out of the report editor when it comes to editing the data source. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to right click here. All right, I'm going to right click here. There we go. Everything is so much slower on GoToWebinar. All right. And I'm going to choose data source. I'm going to choose edit data source definition. We're going to edit the ad hoc data source. This is it. And this we set up before. What we're going to do now is we're going to add something called a where clause. And that where clause is going to say, I'm only interested in records that come from a certain country, where country equals X, whenever we define X to be. To do that, I need to first define an argument. This is going to store the value that the user sets to let them know which records they're interested in. So I'm going to click define value and argument. I'm going to click add. And this argument name is going to be called which country. We tend to put the word which and stuff in front of arguments because it's as if you're asking a question. Which country do you want to see? So that's the name of the argument, is the which country argument. That's a character field, which is fine. I can just leave that alone. And should it have a default value? Nah, we'll just leave it blank. But I could. I mean, I could say the default value is, say, Germany or France or something like that, but I'm just going to leave it blank for now. And now I'm going to say OK. Now, before I leave here, I'm going to come over and take a look at the where clause. So the where clause is something in a SQL statement that lets you define which records you're going to bring down. A lot of you probably already know this, but we have a little builder here to make it easier. So I'm going to add a condition. I'm going to say select a column. I'm going to say country. So where country is equal to, and we're going to specify a value. And I'm not going to specify a value. I'm going to specify an argument. So I'm going to say insert argument, and it's the which country argument we just did. So I've clicked OK. There's my where clause. We are all set. I am finished. So now what happens when I go into this report and I try to preview it? I will show you. It's going to ask me which country. This is just a dialog box that you'll see while you are in the developer, the Alpha Anywhere developer. You can set these arguments programmatically in your web applications, but when you're testing it, this is the dialog box you get. And in this case, I'm going to type in Germany, because those are the records that I'm interested in. And now I'm going to go ahead and do a print preview. Now, interestingly, it's going to ask me again for which country. And every time I do a print preview, it's going to do that. And that's actually kind of what I want, because it lets me change it each time. So I'm going to say Germany. And there are all my records from Germany, and there's nothing else there. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. We're going to run live test. I'm sorry, we're going to do a preview again. Let's double choose France. Why not? Whoops. They're almost neighbors. If it weren't for Belgium in between. Okay, I don't think I have any records in France, or I made a typo. So let me take a look. So oops, I have definitely done something wrong. I apologize for that, but I'm not going to sort out what I've done wrong just right now on the webinar. I'll find out what it is and let you know before. Because I want to move on to something else, and that is, what if I wanted to display what the criteria was for my report up here at the top? So I can do that, and I'll show you how. So one thing I can do when I am creating my filter, this is kind of interesting, is there is a little section here, a little piece of help, which says how to print argument values. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to tell you about this function called the A5 get argument value function. And they used what city is the name of theirs, what country is the name of mine. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, because I know I can get this to work for Germany. So I'm going to say, first I'm going to edit this. The static text will be the country selected is. Okay. And then up here, I'm going to edit this content, and I'm going to put in an expression. What I found is that it does not have that in our built-in functions list, and it's going to be added. But the function you're going to need is, or I showed you where to get it, is A5 get argument value. And then the argument that I'm looking for is called what country. All right, and it can already tell me that this is going to be a character value because it knows what kind of argument that is, which is great. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to print preview this again. I'm going to choose Germany again because I know Germany worked, and I'll sort out why it was trying to do. I think it was trying to find records that were both in Germany and in France, and of course there's no overlap. So we'll click OK. Okay, I got it, except it's supposed to say the country selected is Germany. And so obviously I didn't get that part right. So let's see what I did wrong. I think that should be okay. What country? Tell you what I'll do. Because I always come prepared. I'm going to close this. Let's take a look at this one. The one I did before today's webinar, where I have it set up just basically just the same. Argument get value what country. And here in this one, if I go ahead and say what country, I'm going to say Germany. Oops. And there it is. The selected country is Germany. So I probably had a typo or something on the other one, but that's the way you do it. If you want to see what the and the original question was, how do I see what the selection criteria is on the report? Because you might get a PDF report, think everything is in there, and it isn't because you have some filter applied. So the question is, how do you do that kind of filter? There is another type of function, I can find it for you later, which will literally print out whatever the filter is that you have set up in here. But again, if you're using arguments and filtering it on the SQL Server side, you're probably not going to have that filter set up here. So that's really not going to be much help for you. Also, it would be kind of gobbledygook because, you know, if you put together one of these expressions and I say something like, where country is equal to, and I don't know if I have arguments in here or not, but whatever, you know, X, Y, and Z, this may not be very readable to a non-technical person. So here you get to sort of format how you'd like it to appear, you know, and if you have multiple criteria, you could list them all out as well. The last thing, just in case you didn't notice, is that while these were printed multiple times, where it said the selected country is only printed once, that's because that's up in the header. The header only prints once. The detail prints for each record in the database, and that's how it cycles through. Oh, I see. Someone pointed out they think the problem is I said which country instead of what country, and that's my mistake. Thanks very much. So that apparently is where my error is. All right, so that's how you define a report, how you use arguments, and how you print out the arguments that you're using right on the report, which could be very helpful and answered one of the questions that we had written in last week. The next one is a pretty cool one, and it has to do with the drag and drop control. So let's take a look at that right now. I'm going to go back into Web Projects Control Panel, go into my Web Components, and I have one called drag and drop here somewhere, maybe file upload download. Here's what it is. Yeah. All right. So the file, let me actually just show you it in operation first, because it's cooler that way. And then we can go there. So instead, I'm going to say, go ahead and open this up in a browser. Let's choose, I don't know, Chrome. And I'm going to go ahead and do I don't know if I need fast or full, doesn't matter. They're both pretty fast. And what I've done here is I've created a UX component, and that UX component has what we call a drag drop field in it. And the message in the drag drop field is drag one or more files here to upload. Now, you probably come up with uses for this in quite a few applications. Maybe someone needs to upload a picture of their driver's license or something like that. Often that can just be done with a button, but if they've got a whole bunch of files that they want to upload at once, like a bunch of documents, let's say you are building a document management system in Alpha Anywhere, you might want to use a control like this one. So let's take a look over here on my desktop. You'll see there's a file called test file. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And I'm going to say webinar Wednesday test. I'm going to save that. And so that's what's in my file. And now I can simply click and drag that one or more files. I'm just going to do one in this case. And I'm going to drag it here, right on here to my browser into that control. I'm going to let go. And I did not set this up to give you any feedback that it worked, but you can definitely have a message that says you have successfully uploaded one file and have it trigger other things as well. But I've set this up as simply as possible. So what happened to that file? Well, it actually, if I did it right, got placed up on my S3 bucket, my Amazon Simple Storage Solution bucket. And I can look at my S3 bucket using a program called Cloudberry. So Cloudberry is kind of like a file manager, but it works with the cloud. So it works with S3, it works with Wasabi, and a couple other service solutions. Now you'll see here, this is one I uploaded yesterday. This is called test file. It says 0 bytes. I think I can just refresh here. It should show me that it's been updated. But if it hasn't, why don't we just take a look inside the file itself? I'm going to say open. Yes, I do. And here it says Webinar Wednesday test, the text that I just put in. So I successfully was able to take a file that I modified here on my desktop and upload it to my S3 account by using this drag one or more fields to upload. Now, S3 isn't the only place that you can upload files. If you're running the Alpha Anywhere IIS server or even Classic server, I believe, you can have those files uploaded directly to your server. The nice thing about S3 is that I believe it goes directly to S3 and doesn't tax your server. So it doesn't use any compute units or slow it down or anything like that. It just uses the S3 service in order to do it. So the question is, okay, that's kind of cool. I can move a bunch of files up here. That's neat. But how do I set that up? And I'm going to show you that right now. So right here under the drag and drop field upload, that's the control that I found here. Again, to add a control, just click the plus button. And this one was called drag and drop area. So I just selected that. Once I selected that, here I'll select it again. If I double click on it, oh, I guess nothing happens. If I go down here, I say drag and drop properties, you'll see I've got two different sets of properties. One is the drag and drop area properties itself. That's where I can change things like what text should say here. You know, drag one or more files to upload, what the position should be. It gives you the style of that. If you look back here, you'll see it's kind of got some rounded edges here. That's all controlled here. Here they've placed a border radius of 10 pixels on that style, and you can edit it further. You could give it a background color, for example. That's fairly typical to make an area like lightly shaded gray, maybe put in bold text, which says drag files here. So that's how it displays then to the user. And once that's done, you're also going to want to set it up so that it knows what to do with a file once it's been uploaded. And you do that here in the file upload properties. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And here I've got some targets. In other words, where am I going to send the file? So my choice is I can send it to Amazon 3. I can send it through Amazon S3 indirectly, which first puts it to the Alpha server and then puts it to S3 storage. This might be helpful as they point out, because you want to process that file. Maybe you want to scale it and make thumbnails and things like that. The nice thing about doing it directly to S3, of course, is that it does not place any load on your Alpha server. And then lastly, of course, you can also have it go to a particular file. And you will set that up. The file name of the file will be stored in the file field in the target table. So in other words, you can have it take whatever that person has uploaded and then save the name of that file into a database so that you know which file is which. So I strongly recommend using Amazon S3. It's not very expensive, or use Wasabi, which is even less. It's just nice to have a separate storage solution. Also makes sense if you're using Alpha Cloud or you're running multiple machines behind a load balancer. You may not be able to access that file from one server if it's been saved to another. And that's what Amazon S3 is really great for, is it's a good centralized repository for keeping those files. One thing, though, is that Amazon S3 does take a little bit of setup when you go into their screen to fill out how you want your bucket to work. And here we've given you a little bit of help, and that has to do with CORS, or cross-origin resource scripting. I forget what the last part of the S is, but basically, in order for your application to get to move files to S3, it needs to have permission to do so. And CORS, cross-origin, means that by default, your browser is not going to want you, if you're on, for example, myapp.com, to be sending files directly to Amazon S3, two different domains. That could be a security concern, but you can make an exception for it, and you can do that using CORS help. So I'm going to click on CORS help, and it shows you literally what the JSON is that you need to paste in to Amazon to make it work. Now you'll notice you can't copy, like I'm clicking here, you can't copy and paste our help, but what you can do is you can choose copy to clipboard, which is what I did yesterday. So I did that. And let me show you what that looks like up in S3. And of course, if you watch this video next year, that might be subject to change. That's their software. So I'm going to pull over here to PowerPoint, and I've got a slide that I set up. Here we go. Let's just flip through them all. Oh, here we go. So when you have set up a bucket in Amazon S3, you are going to have, there's going to be a place in, and it explains this actually better in Alpha Anywhere, maybe than I'm going to do it here, but up at the top, there's going to be a thing called permissions. You can't see it. It would be scrolled up here on the screen, and this is just a screenshot. But when I click permissions, there is a box called Cross-Origin Resource Sharing, and that box is blank by default. You can click Edit to open that up, and then what you can do is you can paste in that JSON object that I just showed you in Alpha Anywhere. And if you do that, you should be all set. If you don't have it set up right, you'll know because the browser is going to give you an error, and the error is going to say something like XHR error, which implies that you do not have permission to do what you're asking to do. But once you add this into the cross-origin resource sharing section of your S3 bucket, you'll find that you are good to go, and it'll work, hopefully, as expected. So that is how you set that up. By the way, we do have a webinar for Transform in which I show you how to set up an Amazon S3 bucket. I think it should still be in date. If you're interested in getting hold of that, send me an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. And I'd be happy to point you to that video. You might actually just be able to find it on YouTube as well. It has to do with saving assets in a Transform device, and that happens to use a S3 bucket as well. And it's the same sort of setup. So hopefully that will point you in the right direction to using the drag and drop. So we still have a few minutes left here, which is terrific, actually more than a few, because last week we came out with a new version of Alpha Anywhere. So we have a lot of cool new things that have been released, and I'd like to just briefly go through that list with you guys to show you what's there. So let me pop down here into the Alpha Anywhere release notes. And let's talk real quick about these release notes. You can get to these release notes right inside the software, by the way. That's one way of doing it. You can also get to it from the installer. If I'm in help and I want to see release notes, about Alpha Anywhere, check for new view release notes. So it's going to say current, and you'll see how it breaks it down by year. Now that we're in 2023, we're probably going to add another column here and maybe just limit it to the last 2 years, so 2022, 2023. But and here we go. This opens up the release notes. I'm going to just show it on the Mac because I prefer to do it there. All right. Again, you can find older release notes here. You can find, let's see, not this one, down here. If you're using the pre-release, you can find its release notes there. But this is the main release notes page. You can, I just typically Google it, but again, you can find it right in Alpha Anywhere. So let's take a look at what's new. This came out last week. I think we're going to do a little minor update this week, just to make sure that all our new features are working exactly as we want. But this is out and ready for use. So the first new feature that's listed here is the ability to automatically log in after you've created a new account. So if you build a UX component, you probably know that you have the ability to add login to that. And we also have a login component, which is a component, a newish component. We had an older one that allows you to set up, allowing people to register for an account, log in for an account, all in one place. It handles stuff like two-factor authentication and missing passwords and all kinds of stuff that you'd otherwise have to program yourself. We've done it for you. One feature, though, that you'll see now being used a lot in websites is, and not every website does this, but when you create a new account, provided there's no real approval process like there isn't, let's say you're going to sign up for a Dropbox account or something like that. Once you have created your username and password, instead of like dumping you back at the login screen, it's sometimes just nicer to open them right up into the application. I mean, after all, they did just set their username and password, so they do know what the username and password is. That should be enough authentication. So it is kind of nice when they create an account, not to make them rekey all that information again, but to bring them right into your application. And that's just handled down here by a checkbox. Automatically log in after a new account is created. This only works if you have new account needs approval unchecked. If you're checking each account before you let them in, then obviously you can leave that checked, and this won't even be an option. Right, next up, people have been asking us questions about how do you format date and times in SQL Server, I'm sorry, SQLite, which is a nice little database that you can run on a mobile device. It's also used, you can run, actually can run anywhere. And we use it a lot just to hold sample data and things like that. We now have the ability to specify that date time format as opposed to using what is built into the user's system. And the big advantage of that is that you can put things, for example, in say day, month, year, or year, month, day, and just have it consistent so that people in the United States and people outside of the United States, where we have different formatting and where we put the months and the days, will all be stored consistently inside the database. Just a new little thing to do there. Here's another one for those of you who do Ajax callbacks, and I suspect there's quite a lot of you who do that, but we have now offered the ability to retry an Ajax callback. Sometimes, if the service on the other side is temporarily busy, it's good to let Alpha Anywhere try to run that callback again. And now you can do that by setting the number of retries. Now, this option won't appear unless you set timeout settings. This here is set in milliseconds. So right here, we've set it to 2000 milliseconds, 2 seconds, basically. And after 2 seconds, it's going to try again. If I had set it to 0, I believe it's going to keep trying forever. And if I set it to like 3, it's going to try 3 times, 4, it's going to try 4 times, and so on. So that's kind of a cool thing. If it does fail, you can run a script that lets the user know that it didn't work. They should try again later or something like that. And that's all set up here, so you can do multiple tries against a callback. The next one, which this really I should have a much nicer graphic for this, but we have someone on staff who builds our SVG icons, and recently he has created 86 new ones based on stuff that people would like to see: searchlights, text spacing, thermometer boiling points, things like that. You'll find them where you normally find your SVG icons. So for example, when you're defining a button and you say you want to use an image, and it says what kind of image, and you choose SVG icons, these new 86 ones will appear in your list. This new one has to do with a spin control, and basically the spin control now allows the primary sub theme. So what does that even mean? Well, let me show you what I mean by that. Let me pop over here back into Alpha Anywhere, and we're going to take a look. Let me close this. Do you want to save your changes? Nah. So we're going to take a look at controls. I think I have one for a spin box. Spin list. Okay. So a spinless control, again, I can find that here for my controls, is a data control, meaning that it returns a value that you can save into a database. And so I'm going to just call this one test list. And I'm just actually going to build this as one. So I'm not going to build multiple controls this time. So actually, I'll just use spinless too. That should be fine. So I'm going to click OK. And now I have a second spin list. And I'm actually going to remove the break between these two. I already had one spin list. So there's spin list 1, there's spin list 2. Let's take a look at Workin Preview. You should see 2 lists. One I've defined earlier, and the other one is totally blank, so you can't even see it. So let's go set that one up. And in the meantime, I'm going to, can I comment that out? No, I can show the comment. All right. I am going to go ahead and just delete the first one. Look at spin list 2. And the properties for spin list 2, I can find here. In other words, the choices are going to be here. So what we're going to do is spin list properties. Aha, method for defining the list. That list could be taken from a data series, or in many cases, it's just going to be static, like, for example, days of the week and things like that won't change. So we'll do that here with static. And I will define the static data. And all I need to do here is just type in a list. I could say option 1, option 2, option 3. But we do have some predefined lists, which are helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and use one. I'm going to use weekdays. And there they are. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And let's take a look how this is set up. I find that sometimes the length of it isn't very far. Well, let's not worry about that. I'm going to click Save. Let's go into Working Preview. We'll take a look at what is in that spin list. All right, so there's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the change that we have made is that we've made it a little bit easier to see which one is the highlighted option by using what's known as a subtheme, which is a topic we've covered before. How do you set up a subtheme? Well, it's easy. What we're going to do is we'll select our control here, and we are going to go take a look at the class, the style. Here is the class that we're using. That's not for the field label. I want to do it for the whole thing. Here we go. Width. Control container class name. There we go, under field properties. That's the one we want. I love this little shortcut, this little magnifying glass for finding these things. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set a subtheme on, oh shoot, I think I've got that set up wrong. Can I do that here? Just bear with me for 1 second. Nope, nope. Let's see if I can find subtheme here. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place. Sorry, it's a property unto itself. So I just had to look up subtheme. There it is. It used to be that subtheme would only have this one, which is called base. That's the one that's been applied. But there is a new one called primary that you could see down here. Primary is nice because it does a little bit of a shading thing there. And it's something that I would actually suggest that you use in your applications. So I'm going to click OK on that. And you'll see when I go into Working Preview that it should be shaded, the selection that I've got, right? So if I choose Tuesday, for example, it is now highlighted. It's a small thing, but it can make a big difference to the user when they're filling it out. All right, so let's go back here and see if there's anything else that I wanted to cover. There isn't. Let's go back into release notes. Okay. This one has to do with, there's been it's a new event that's been fired that lets you know that your upload to Amazon S3 is complete. Definitely something that could be useful. Maybe alerting the user or whatever that things have gone as they appeared. The next one, this is kind of cool, for the security framework, and we covered this, I think, at the end of last year, the use of two-factor authentication. Well, we've used yet another factor, I'd say multi-factor authentication, and that is you can now use the Google Authenticator app with your Alpha Anywhere applications. And we even have a way of sending the QR code to a user. I don't know if you are familiar with the Google Authenticator app. You could just get it at the App Store or the Android store. You install it. It verifies that you are who you are in order just to use the authenticator. But when that's done, what'll happen is you can get a QR code that you could send to your user. That gets scanned right inside the app. And then the app gives you a number back. It's usually a 6-digit number. And you type in that number within the period of time before it expires, and it will let you into the application. It's just an extra level of security. It's sometimes more convenient than having to use SMS or a text message or something like that. So using the authenticator is a great way to keep everything in one place. It doesn't clutter up your text messages. Send email using project property settings. This is actually a pretty minor update. I think the difference is that you can now overwrite what you've got set in your project property settings when you set a settings parameter up here at the beginning of send email using project properties. We can do a session maybe on sending emails again. That was pretty cool. Also, people have been interested in taking a look again at push notifications and SMS. So if you've got any requests along those lines, of course, send them into guides@alphasoftware.com. Okay, UX, something said UC, someone said UC component. Sorry, I'm looking at a question which just came in, and maybe there's a typo here in the notes. Wait. Ah, there it is. It's the very first one. All right. Well, these haven't made it into our documentation system yet, so let me make a quick note that that needs to be updated. So UC versus UX. We do not have a UC component, so don't be confused. This should have said UX. Okay, what else we got here? This is kind of cool because it's something that people try to do a lot. When you're setting up a list control and you've got columns of data, sometimes it's nice just to put a spacer in between those. And there are various ways of doing it, but we've added just a really simple way of just saying column spacer. So if you add that in as an item, you can define how much space and stuff that you can put in between your columns in your list. Something worth checking out. Server-side synchronization log. You know, I haven't actually looked into this one well enough, so maybe I'll come back to you on this one. Client-side tempering errors. That's just a new way of doing stuff. Listener recycling. This is helpful. If you are having issues with the classic server not being responsive enough. Another session I'd like to do is just to take everyone sort of on a tour of what the settings are here for the server, because there are a lot of them. I know I covered them in a breakout session at our last DevCon, but I think it would be worth doing a real webinar on. Another minor update, but one that was important to one of our users who requested it, and that was that the report save as function. It has the ability when you save a report that you can send that report via email. What we didn't have before was the ability to send a CC or a BCC email to multiple other addresses. And that's been added in the newer version. This one is cool, fixed connection strings and aliases. So if you've got grid components and UX components in which instead of using connection strings, you've used hard-coded strings, which happens, especially if you're just doing testing. That's not really a great design practice. Really, it's best to keep everything under a name connection string so you can make a change all in one place. I mean, if the authentication details have changed, for example, or IP address or something like that, you don't want to change that every single place that you have it in your grid and your UX manually. You want to just do that in a centralized location. Well, what this new function will do under bulk operations is really cool. It'll go looking through your UXs and your grids, and it will find cases where you have used hard-coded connection strings, and it will look to see if there is a named connection string with the same definition, in which case it'll trade it out for that named connection string. On the other hand, if there isn't one, it will build, if I understand, although I haven't tried it myself, it will actually build out a connection string that you need, and it will use that. So it'll sort of fix everything all in one go. There are people who have got hundreds. I think there might even be thousands of UXs in some, especially if you're counting sub UXs that people build. Going through and cleaning up your code that way would be a pain. This is kind of a new thing that you can do. The next thing is in Amazon S3. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we now support tagging. So tagging is just a property that gets associated with a file when you put it up onto Amazon S3. Sometimes you'll use tagging to indicate who the file belongs to. You can use it really for lots and lots of different reasons. So it's a cool feature that Amazon S3 supports, and now we support it as well, that you can add tags when you upload your files to S3. Optimizing publishing. This basically works, this is for alpha launch, and it works kind of like, and again, alpha launch is a program available in the iOS and Apple Store, which lets you run software that were alpha anywhere applications that you've developed without having to put them directly into the stores yourself. You simply run our application then makes calls to your server and runs your code. When you are publishing your code up to a server so that Alpha Launch can find it, in the past, we used to just upload absolutely everything that was in there. Right now, we've made it a little bit smarter. If you check the Optimize Publishing checkbox, It's going to check to see what has already been published there in the past so that it only publishes what it needs to. Seems like a pretty obvious idea, but it's not something we've had in alpha launch. It is something we have in alpha cloud. It is something that we have in our other publishing options, but until now, not in alpha launch. It's there now. A couple other little things to point out for those of you who work with Cordova to build native apps for iOS and Android. We are officially on the latest official release of the Cordova iOS. So you shouldn't have any problems with versioning when it comes time to put your applications up into the store. On the other hand, if you do have, on the other hand, there are many things that you can run into when you're doing that. If you do have questions, always send them to guides@alphasoftware.com. We have someone here, actually a couple people who are very good at helping you sort out those kinds of problems. All right, how are we doing on time? Good, I got another 5 minutes left or so. This is another Cordova-related enhancement. It basically allows you to describe to iOS why you are using certain features such as location and things like that. And if you don't use this, basically you can't use certain features because of improvements that Apple has made to its privacy and security settings. So you basically have to let the user know and have to let Alpha know why it is that you want to track the user's location. You can no longer just build an app that will track the user's location without them knowing. Personally, I think that's a good thing, but we do support that now, and you can still build apps like that. A couple of problems that we had fixed in terms of bugs. Probably the big one was saving reports to PDF in desktop applications. We don't have a lot of desktop people still there, but we did make some changes that had affected that. Other than that, I think that is about it. So again, if any of you have ideas for topics that you would like to have covered, and these three were based on ones that people have written in, I would be happy to tackle them for you. I know one in particular that you'll probably be excited about is someone has written in saying, okay, that calendar control in the list, in other words, the list layout calendar, the one that we've talked about for years and is hidden behind a feature key, can we see a demonstration of that in progress? The answer is yes. I have put that on my list of upcoming webinars, so we will tackle that as well. But again, if there's anything else you want to see, send it to guides@alphasoftware.com. Wonderful. So it looks like we have come to the end of our time. Thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. I really appreciate having you here, having you asking questions. And again, just keep talking to us. Hope to see you at our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.